Hey guys, so we are back to finish the last parts of chapter 16 in Med-Micro. And so now we're going to talk about how diseases get transmitted from all of these different lovely things. So we mentioned previous scientists in the previous video and what they were talking about. We'll definitely need to know those for chapter 16, but we also have some other terms that we need to cover. So a reservoir, that is where the pathogen, whatever the bad guy is residing. And it could be people, it could be animals, it could be the ground. If we were talking about anthrax, for example, it can live in the soil and that's where it naturally hangs out. So that's a reservoir. So it's anything where that pathogen is going to reside, living or non-living. It just depends. If it is a carrier, carriers are going to transmit the disease, but the carrier does not have to automatically be infected with the disease. It could be a passive carrier. And with a passive carrier, they are carrying it on them, but they're not infected. So, for example, we said anthrax lives in the soil. Bacillus anthracis lives in the soil. It's totally okay there. But people that get infected with anthrax, it's commonly called, God, what was it, like sheep shearer's disease or something like that. And had another nickname because it could be transmitted by livestock. So if you were handling the livestock that are out in the pasture, maybe picking this up, then it may pass it on to you even though the livestock may not have it. It may have it in its fur coat. And when you go to shear the wool off of the sheep, then you get it that way. So the sheep was just a passive carrier. It's not infected with it, it's just transmitting it. As opposed to an active carrier. An active carrier is infected. They have it. But as we all know now, you can be asymptomatic and still spread something. You still have it. You are testing positive for it. You are testing positive for COVID and you had no idea that you had it, but you were infected with it and you could be spreading it, or your friend could be spreading it, but you're not showing signs. So that's asymptomatic. And that is happening all the time. We have documented evidence of this happening, of people that did not even know that they had something. And this has been going back, not just with COVID, of course, this has been going back for a long, long time. Our primary example is notorious. It is Typhoid Mary. And I want to say I've mentioned her in a few videos before. And this is the time where we get to talk about Typhoid Mary. And you can watch and go to this handy little link. There are videos out there. I think there is a drunk history one that's actually pretty funny if you're into the drunk history show. But not that I'm condoning doing that. But Typhoid Mary, so a background on her, she was an immigrant to the US. I think she came from Ireland, I want to say. And so back in the day, there weren't a whole lot of jobs for women. It was very restricted, right? There was only certain pathways you could go. So you kept up at the house and some sort of, clean or a cook, or maybe you could be a nurse in healthcare, but there was very limited opportunities for women back in Mary's time. And she was a cook. That was what she knew. That was what her trade was. And she was good at it. So she had gotten hired on after she immigrated in for a family. And everyone got sick. And so Mary got better. She seemed fine. She went on and went to another family. And that family got sick. And so at first they thought, well, maybe it was the shellfish. Maybe it was the dish that she made that made everyone sick. And it's not her. But after the second family got sick, the doctor started to think it's probably something having to do with the person and not necessarily the food. So they started really looking into Mary and figuring out what's going on with her. And she was not having it. She was like, I am fine. You can look at me and I'm fine. I don't have any signs of this. It is not me. And you're only after me because I'm an immigrant and you're persecuting me because I'm an immigrant woman. And you shouldn't be doing this. It's not right. for you to try and imprison me for something that you were falsely accusing me of because I'm not showing any signs. Well, they let her out under the promise that she wouldn't cook for anyone again. We're going to let you go, but please, don't do this. You're going to infect others. Don't do it. But of course, that's what she knew. That was how, she was able to earn her way in this life. And so she went back to cooking for others, and others got sick. So eventually she was quarantined, she was exiled, imprisoned, basically, in a facility where she lived out the rest of her days. And they would monitor her stool, and she kept testing positive for this. And we didn't have a vaccine, we didn't have any treatment for it then. And about 10% of people that came down with typhoid, it was fatal for them. So it was pretty serious. But she was adamant, that I am not showing signs, that you were just imprisoning me falsely. It's not fair. So it was an interesting balance at the time of, is she right? Are we imprisoning somebody for the wrong reasons? There was no way to prove it at the time. And then there are the rumors that post-mortem that she did have typhoid in her gallbladder. And then others are saying that that never happened, that there was never an autopsy. So it is an interesting story, to say the least. And it is notorious, Typhoid Mary, for being an asymptomatic carrier that spread disease everywhere she went, unknowingly. So she was a prime example of an asymptomatic carrier. She wasn't showing signs, but she definitely had it and was spreading it. As far as hosts, there are going to be definitive hosts and intermediate hosts. Definitive hosts is where the parasite ends up as an adult. Some of these parasites will have life cycles where they will have multiple hosts. There's one, schistosoma will invade other animals. Like sometimes it may take up residence in fish, sometimes it takes up residence in a snail before it passes on. Lyme disease can be transmitted on ticks, but the ticks are also biting white-footed mice or deer. Those are all other intermediate hosts. So intermediate hosts are like the middleman, and wherever that parasite ends up as its adult form on its host, that's going to be its definitive host. Typhoid Mary. All right, how does transmission happen? So transmission can happen with direct or indirect contact. So direct, person to person, like this dad loving on, I'm assuming it's a dad, I don't know, honestly. But we have this male figure and a baby here, so I'm going on a limb and saying it's a relative. And it's kissing on baby's cheeks because she's just got the cutest cheeks and you want to love on her. But you may not know that you are sick and you are directly transmitting something to this adorable, darling little baby. So if it was parent to child, if this was father and daughter, then that would be direct transmission, contact transmission, and it is going vertically from father to daughter. So that would be vertical transmission. If it was, mother passing on something to newborn baby, that's also vertical transmission. And we'll talk about that more so in repro when we talk about reproductive diseases that can be passed to baby as baby's being born. But direct contact happens. It can be vertical or it could be horizontal. And we all know better at this point in time between, going up and high-fiving your friends and shaking hands. We understand now that that direct contact could lead to infection and spread disease. So we try to limit that horizontal direct contact. The contact transmission could be specific from a certain location on the body. So we use masks, right, to cover up our respiratory surfaces because COVID likes to hang out in respiratory passages. That's where it's happy. If we were talking about HIV, for example, that is passed, through sexual acts. So that body part, and then also it could be bloodborne. So if you were donating blood or committing sexual acts, but it's not going to be passed from a handshake. That's not how that works. So it's very site specific. Other things can be passed through droplets. So hopefully all of us at Georgia Highlands are still wearing our masks on campus like we are supposed to prevent droplet transmission, because it is scientific fact that wearing a mask will decrease the droplets coming from you and coming from your friends, and we'll all be safer because of this. It is science. It's fact. It's proven that if we decrease the droplets, we're less likely to transmit airborne pathogens like COVID. Indirect, using the pathogens get involved onto fomites. And a fomite is an inanimate object. It could be bedding. It could be somebody's towel that they wipe their face with and they put it aside. It could be this doorknob. Who knows how many times the doorknobs are getting cleaned, but it's not that often, even in today's age. So be careful with what you're touching. Make sure that you're using hand sanitizer after you touch surfaces. Make sure that if you're going into a face-to-face classroom at this point, that you are cleaning off your surface, because you don't know who came in, and it doesn't have to be COVID, right? It could be flu, it could be something, but they have coughed or, I don't know, sneezed, did something nasty, and their droplets have now spread onto the surface of the desk, and you have no idea that this is here. You come down, you're ready for class, you sit your stuff out on the table, and you don't know that you are now resting your hands on somebody else's sneeze particles on the desk. So hopefully everyone's wearing a mask to prevent that from happening, and hopefully everyone is grabbing a wipe from the beginning of the classroom and wiping down surfaces, because that is policy right now at this period in time in October of 2020. And as we clean our surfaces, we are removing the possibility, hopefully, that we will be coming in indirect. We want to limit this. So we clean surfaces as much as possible, as best as we can, to limit indirect contact. And I know our classrooms are also getting fogged at night to hopefully disinfect the surfaces. Other forms of transmission besides direct and indirect contact, it could use a vehicle. That vehicle could be food. I want to say we've had a convo about bad potato salad that had some toxins in it and made everybody sick. And so it could be food. Foodborne illnesses are for reals. They are no fun, and that could be the vehicle of transmission. It could be water. We talked about Jon Snow and how he was tracking down cholera to that point source of that bad well that was being contaminated. And so the water was the vehicle of transmission. If we were talking about air, it could be the passenger on the airplane that had TB, and now he's coughing that TB in this recycled airplane cabin. And now, they have filters, but still it is air trapped, and it could be transmitting from one person to the next. The air flow would be the vehicle transmission to pass on that disease. So those are other types of transmissions. It could also be a vector. Let's check back on case study with the turduckens. We identified that it is turduckens. I don't know if y'all have ever had a turducken. I have not. But it is that weird combo, right, of turkey and duck and chicken. And so it turns out that the facility was not clean. It had salmonella in it, and every time it made these turduckens, it was passing that on to every single one of those turduckens from this facility. So it wasn't clean. They were spreading salmonella to everybody. The plant ended up being shut down and decontaminated. And then they recalled all the bad turduckens with the salmonella and pulled them so nobody else got sick if they decided to have turducken for Christmas. We're safe there. All right, other ways of transmission. Vectors. I was talking about Lyme disease and ticks. That is a biological vector. Usually our biological vectors, our biological transmission is an arthropod. It's usually a tick or a mosquito, a fly of some kind of arthropod, a jointed appendage creature is usually our most common biological vector. The textbook mentions kissing bugs. Those things are coming up from the warmer Central America, and they're coming up through Mexico. And now we are starting to see these guys, I want to say in Texas now, because they're creeping up from climate change. And so these guys are kissing bugs, and what they do is they feed on blood. So they'll bite you, and then they'll get their blood meal, and while they're eating, they go to the bathroom too. And so it's really gross, and they're gonna, give you a bite, and they bite you, around the mouth. They go to the bathroom, and then you're like, oh, in your sleep, trying to get them off your face because you don't know what's happening. You're just feeling it, and you rub your face, and you unknowingly rub their poop into your bloodstream, and then that could possibly give you Chagas disease from the kissing bug. So these are biological transmission from vectors. It could also be a mechanical transmission where that arthropod doesn't actually have the thing in it, but it may have it on it. So with the mechanical vector, we've got a fly. It just sat on a load of poop, sat on some poop, and then it decided to come and sit on your hamburger. So you don't know that. So you shoo the fly away and you take a big old bite of that delicious burger. And now you have eaten whatever was in that poop unknowingly because, the fly landed on it, got it on its feet, and then it stuck its dirty, nasty feet on your hamburger bun and you got it that way. So it could be a mechanical vector. It could be a biological vector. I can't make up these stories. My brother literally texted me yesterday with a picture of deer meat from his harvest with worms all in it, with maggots all in it. And he's like, what is this? I don't know, but don't eat it. And it turns out that it was a fly, a bottle fly, I want to say, that had landed and laid eggs on it. I still told her, please don't eat it. Even if it's not embedded in the meat, just don't eat it. When in doubt, throw it out. It's always a good idea because you don't know for sure. And why take a chance? Why take a chance if it was, a mechanical vector or a biological vector? Just don't risk it, do the best you can and stay safe. Here are lots of different pictures of all the different things that could be common arthropod vectors. Lots of flies, fleas on the fleas, if we're going to talk about the plague, fleas on the rats, right? Kissing bugs, mosquitoes, all these guys are biological vectors. Zika virus. Zika virus was really big a couple years ago, probably when this textbook came out. Zika virus was pretty headline news. Not anymore, but it was. And so different scientists were trying to study, how's it spread? It's spread by mosquitoes, but it's not just one mosquito, it's multiple types of mosquitoes. And so they were looking to genetically modify the mosquitoes. And I want to say that this year was the year that they were planning on releasing these genetically modified mosquitoes that were bred to not breed. I want to say is what it was. I need to look into that headline more. Oh, excuse me. But they were, supposed to release genetically modified mosquitoes that were designed to, I think, attract mates to potentially breed, but they were modified so they couldn't actually breed and reproduce. I want to say that was coming out a few months back, maybe, for these genetically modified mosquitoes coming out of Florida. Quarantining is a word that we probably all know by now. It is October when I am filming this, and we have heard about quarantining since at least February, if not definitely March. And probably most of us at some point have possibly had to quarantine ourselves, either because we were sick or we were around somebody who tested positive and was sick. So we know quarantining. It depends on the disease, right? We know how coronavirus is spread, so we know how to best quarantine for that. It depends on the disease. Is it airborne? Is it not airborne? Is it like Ebola and it's spread through bodily fluids? And so if you don't get in touch with those bodily fluids, you're pretty safe. How is it spread? That's going to impact your quarantine. How can you limit the risk of transmission depending on what's going on with the virus. What is it? Our healthcare associated HAIs, or nosocomial infections are going to be the ones where you pick up. They're usually the superbugs that you might pick up in a hospital, like MRSA, um, methicillin resistant um, staph is going to be one that is one of those hospital superbugs. These might happen post-surgery. They might happen at a surgical infection site. They may happen because you needed a catheter and the equipment wasn't sterile. It just depends. But nosocomial infections are infections that you got pretty much because you were in a hospital and you got exposed to them in that medical facility. Moving on to the last section, which won't take very long at all. Global health. Who monitors the global health? Oh, that's right. It's WHO. It's WHO. The World Health Organization. We've probably heard plenty about the World Health Organization at this point again in 2020. This is the group that monitors diseases throughout the world, and they will sound the alarm depending on what is going on. So they track all the diseases. They are definitely going to sound an alarm for an emerging or a re-emerging disease, an infectious disease. So a re-emerging disease is one that we thought, is under control. And then all of a sudden something's changed. This thing has evolved, something's happened, and now we're seeing this thing out again. Maybe people have stopped vaccinating, and now we're seeing a rise in something that we thought we had eliminated. So re-emerging is something that we thought we had under control, and now it's back, versus an emerging disease. And at the time this textbook was written, Ebola was pretty big headline news then. And so it was pretty much an emerging disease. I mean, it had showed up way back in the day. Then but then it came back. We heard a whole lot more about it in the 90s, and then especially in mid 2010, 2015-ish, is when it made another outbreak. And I want to say this textbook was written shortly after this, maybe 2016 or 2017 was when this textbook came out. So this was pretty big news of Ebola coming out as this, deadly virus that is coming out, and we weren't, 100% sure how to keep that under control. So the WHO was one of the ones that sounds the alarm when an emergent disease is happening, or a re-emerging disease that we thought we had under control is back out. So SARS was another thing that was new. This respiratory virus for SARS was something that we hadn't seen before. And so we had SARS and we had MERS. We had SARS because it was Asian for the A. And then we had MERS for the Middle Eastern. And these were respiratory viruses that we're pretty sure were possibly zoonotic, transmitted at first, and they spread similar to, COVID's possible origins. These were things that we hadn't seen before, but they were relatively short-lived. They stayed in a location, and it didn't seem to spread worldwide at the rate that COVID has today. So I logged into WHO to get some current stats for us. And as of today, when I'm filming this on October 30th, in the United States alone, we have over 8 million confirmed cases. And out of those 8 million confirmed cases, we've had 226, almost 250,000 people have died from coronavirus at this point. It is clearly a very, very serious virus that we need to take under serious consideration. Globally, over 44 million people have come down with coronavirus, and out of that, over 1 million people have died, with the US having a significant chunk of those fatal infections. So if you want current information that WHO has for global as well as just the United States, you can click this link and get that information there. But you are going to find all the latest stuff that the WHO's got at this location. Other things that may be emerging or re-emerging, we talked about HIV and AIDS, other things. When did we find these things? When did we discover them? We discovered, Ebola back in the day in the 70s, but then it went under and we didn't really hear anything about Ebola until, again, in the 90s. Swine flu in 2009, that was no fun. I got that one. Lyme disease. Lyme disease is funny. It was first proven not by a bunch of doctors, but by a bunch of moms. They in Lyme, oh God, I want to say it's Connecticut, were coming in, these mothers coming in with their children that were infected, going, something's happening with my children. They're showing these signs of being ill. They're lethargic. Some of them are having these bullseye, these rashes. Some of them are having neurological symptoms. What is going on? And the moms were the ones that raised the red flag for Lyme disease. West Nile virus is another one, another vector spread by mosquitoes, similar to Zika with West Nile virus. The dog is coming in and moving my stuff. All right, so that is the last of chapter 16. Let me know if you have any questions. I hope you have a good day and stay safe and healthy.